Hi everyone, this is Jason Stallings with Jason Stallings Art and the Artifice Podcast. I want to talk to y'all today about a kind of a long-term project I've been developing centered around iconography that explores here we go, images from different parts of the world. This is North America. The first one is Oceania, and historical iconography and connecting history with the present, and sort of exploring my interest in educating or informing people about other cultures outside of the United States, or I guess connecting people in the world around with each other in some respect. And I had never really developed a body of work that's centered on one idea. I mean, I've developed a identity, a visual kind of style, and I have developed different individual ideas that fit within maybe one or two pieces at a time, kind of going back to the education that I had and my interest in editorial art. And so, like, going from more of a commercial background in my schooling more towards a fine art approach, I had really geared things in a certain way. So about a year ago, I decided it was time to, after I had a show, it was a solo exhibition, great presentation, looked really good, and I realized that just, needed to refresh my approach, wanted to work on my drawing skills and sort of explore some ideas that I had that went back to my early education and interests. I have kind of a history early on of traveling. I went to Spain, Thailand, China, France, Italy, many parts of the United States. So, I mean, in that respect, pretty fortunate, but it's sort of been an education for me and something that helped me to get outside of my own sphere and inform ideas that shape the way I think and view the world. And it's sort of how I challenge preconceived notions. So I wanted to bring that to my audience and my viewers. There's a few things I've done. I've developed a rough draft of a book that I have done a video on, but it was around the creative process, and these drawings kind of became the beginning of that. I still have that in rough draft form and waiting to see where that goes. But I had also had this idea, I worked in college radio when I was at SCAD. So I sort of had this knowledge and interest in media in different respects. I eventually discovered shows like Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown, his early shows as well, The Reservations, watched a lot of Somebody Feeds Phil. I mean, these are all food-centric shows, but at some point I thought it'd be fun to develop this idea of a travel-oriented show, and this was partially inspired by something Anthony Bourdain did. He's interviewed a couple of artists in his show, and really, I think David Chow's one. I have to look that up. But I mean, there's some Brazilian and Argentinian art that he covered that's really fascinating, and I've always really liked this idea that his show kind of created a healthier awareness and dialogue between people within the United States and outside, and I feel like there's been a real noticeable shift away from that. So my motivation is to sort of rebridge that gap in some way. And I suppose creating this series was a step in that direction. But it really helped to reframe and update the way I was thinking about forming ideas. And as I've begun to dig into the process of making the paintings, that's also made me take some stock of like how I approach paintings compositionally, how the ideas can be developed across more than one panel, and work as a series or set of series, is plural. And so it's been a real great growth process. And yeah, so that moving into another experience I had where I applied for a show with the Mesquite Art Center. And I have a friend who's involved there, and she's a great individual. But I'd realized that reflecting on my own experience going through that process, like, wow, like, what am I proposing aside from the works I've done disparately over a number of years? I thought, well, maybe this is a good chance to take stock of how I approach these things and how they fit into a larger narrative. In my last show, I did a small wall of like process sketches and ideas, and people did respond to that really well. So I'm thinking, okay, formatting is growing here, and let's see where I can take this. So that worked really well. I kind of explored things like, what do you find in nature? What's the most common food source? What's a cultural identifier of people in different parts of the world? Like North America, this is like Canada, United States, Mexico, you have Central America. And then by the time I got to it, this is the last set I did, which is Oceania. Also did one for Asia, Africa, and Antarctica, which is technically that's going to be interesting. It's technically a continent, but it's not a continent in the same traditional sense we think of every other one. But, the kind of instigating concept was exploring the 7 ancient wonders of the world. While I was doing this, I also discovered wax encaustic painting. Right, I'd had them, and I just decided, okay, it's time to learn this and dig in and figure out how this works. So with that, you can do collage elements. So I was thinking, okay, like, let me cut up the different sketches I've done in watercolor and pen and ink and drawing, and lay them into here. So whether that becomes part of the final presentation is still to be determined, but I was trying to find a way to organically merge these ideas visually and just learn something new. It's been fun. So I've also been working a lot on learning, getting an understanding of how to network better and how to reach out and build a community. So, this is sort of the informal summary of this of the first set of this series, and it's been fun. The things that were interesting to me is in creating the Oceania paintings is I found certain motifs that kind of began to be appealing to repeat, like the koala bear. Some of the Maori masks are interesting. Some things that have different levels of focus. So far, the architectural elements are the things that seem to be challenging to incorporate, just because organic things are easier to recognize because you don't have a pre-established expectation of how they are supposed to look. Man-made objects, traditionally, this has been well studied, and this is a thing you learn in art school, are things that are hard to remember on a regular basis as imperfect. So, I'm not saying that well. The basic idea is that, like, you have an expectation of how a building or a manufactured product, even if it's like a candy bar or a food item, those things are, if they don't look exactly the way your mind is expecting them to look, something seems off. But an organic thing, like a piece of fruit, a food, or an animal, those things have natural imperfections that the mind is more willing to forgive. So, that's just something that comes to mind when I'm abstracting these ideas. Like the set of drawings I did for Europe, which is right here, ended up being largely architectural. Not entirely, but largely. So, and you have some of the Asia stuff. And, it's going to be interesting because, like, I want to be careful about how I address things like cultural appropriation, because I want it to be, seen as a positive thing and something that's creating a dialogue between cultures, not alienating anyone. So that is going to be an interesting challenge. And one thing that was proposed to me that might still consider, but it's still very much to be determined, is whether I include the modern wonders of the world. And maybe in some limited cases I will explore that, just to kind of maybe round up and really crystallize the concept. So, I have a very clear set of ideas I'm working with and a style, and I'm in the middle of developing the process and the art. So that exploratory process is fascinating, but I have a very clear idea of the material I'm working with and the end goal. And I'm, with some level of flexibility, but the idea is that, like, once I have the final set of paintings, some sets may have 2 or 3 panels, some may have 6 or 7, and I think that the time and materials and costs are going to factor in a little bit, but this is sort of my informal way of proposing a show. But I'm going to document this clearly, and people will be able to see how it develops as it goes through, and by the time we get to the finish line, you can go through the editing process and say, okay, what really works for a show? What kind of space is it going for? I mean, I am doing this without any expectation of how much space is needed. Just creating and seeing what works. So anyway, this is an exciting process. Thank you for going along with me on it. If you have any questions, please visit my website, jason-stallings.com, or shoot me an email at jason@jason-stallings.com. And I'll see you soon. Thanks.